Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Honorable Rector of Wali Songo Islamic State University, Semarang, the Honorable Vice Rector of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Samara, the Honorable Head of the Center of Research and Community Service of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang, or LP2M UIN Wali Songo, and all of the Honorable Kepala Pusat, the Honorable Director and Vice Director of Postgraduate Programs of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang, as well as the Honorable Deans and Leaders of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang. To the respectable invited speakers, Professor Dr. Etin Anwar from Harvard University, USA, Bapak Hans Abdil Harmaka Putra, PhD from Hartford International University, Connecticut, USA, Dr. Nasif Manabilang Adio from Miriam College, the Philippines, and all of the respectable participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let us express our gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the Almighty, the most merciful and the most beneficent, for blessing us the opportunity to attend the Second International Conference on Islamic History and Civilization, or the second ICON-ISHIC 2021, entitled with the theme, Exploring Islamic Perspective and Practices for Peaceful Plural Society. This conference is conducted by the Center of Research and Community Service of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang, or LP2M UIN Wali Songo. Secondly, may the peace and blessings from Allah upon the last prophet and messenger, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and on his household and companions. Respectable guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, let me read to you the contents of the opening ceremony series. The first is the opening greetings from the Master of Ceremony. The second is the singing of the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. And the third is the welcoming speech and greetings from the head of the Center of Research and Community Service of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang, or LP2M UIN Wali Songo, Bapak Dr. Haji Ahmad Arif Junaidi, MA. And the fourth is the keynote speech, as well as opening remarks from the first Vice Rector of UIN Wali Songo, Bapak Dr. H.M. Mohsin Jamil, MAG. Our dearest guests, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, next, it is time for the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. To all of the audiences, please kindly stand up. all of the audiences, please kindly sit down. Our dearest guests, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, next, it is time for the speech and greetings from the head of the Center of Research and Community Service of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang, or LP2M UIN Wali Songo, Bapak Dr. Haji Ahmad Arif Junaidi, MA. With honor, I would like to invite Bapak Dr. Haji Ahmad Junaidi, MA. The time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi al-mujahidin at-tahirin wa man tabi'ahu bi ihsanin ila yaumiddin, amma ba'd. Honorable Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo Semarang, Profesor Dr. Kiai Haji Imam Taufik, MAG, Honorable Vice Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo Semarang, especially Vice Rector 1 for academic purposes, for academic issues, Professor Mohsin Jamil, MAG, all deans, Head of Bureau, Head of Centers, and also Secretary of the Institute for Research and Community Development of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo Semarang, all committee and also participants of this international conference, and last but not least, speakers of this international conference. We have 20 speakers in this international conference, and 3 of them are overseas speakers. First of all, I'd like to extend my warmest gratitude for Allah for giving us an opportunity to speak here, to meet here, to communicate here in this international conference on Islamic history and civilizations. Then, without the blessing from God, it's impossible for us to conduct this international conference. The second one is salawat and salam are referred to Prophet Muhammad, the Prophet that will give us shafa'ah in hereafter. Without this shafa'ah, it's impossible for us to face the riot of doomsday. The third one, I have to thank to all of you for attendance in this international conference, online or offline as well. And then I'm very happy that this international conference can be conducted as good as possible. The central issue, or the main ideas of this international conference is exploring Islamic perspective and practices for peaceful, plural society. We know that at the moment there is still so many conflict, even armed conflict in Indonesia, due to the differences in religion, also ethnicity and political affiliations. Even we have so many violence and a conflict. So we need to find the best effective way to resolve the conflict and then to repair the harmony between the plural society. So that is why we conduct this international conference. Through this international conference, I think that we can share our ideas, we can share our perspective, our theories, our experience in research, and so on. Then we can find the best effective way to find the best solution, the best effective way to stop the conflict and also to repair the harmony among the plural society. Through this conference, I think we can share our ideas, our perspective, and also our experience in research and so on. Then we can find the best effective way to solve that. This conference will be participated by some hundred of participants and 20 speakers, and three of the speakers are from overseas university, and they are Professor Etin Anwar from Hobart University, United States of America, and then Professor Hans Abdil Harmagaputra, PhD from Hartford Seminary, Connecticut University, United States of America, and then Professor Nasif Manabilang Adiong, PhD from Miriam College, Philippines. So finally, I hope that Vice Rector 1, Professor Musin Jamil, can officially open this international conference. Thank you for any attention and sorry for any shortcoming. Wallahu muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Bapak Dr. Haji Ahmad Arif Junaidi, MA, for the great speech. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the next is the time for the welcoming speech from the first Vice Rector of Wali Songo Islamic State University of Semarang. While we are waiting for Bapak Dr. H.M. Muhsin Jamil MAG to join the Zoom, Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are still waiting for Bapak Dr. H.M. Muhsin Jamil MAG as the first Vice Rector of UIN Wali Songo Semarang to give us remark and officially open this international webinar. So, please kindly stay tuned with us until we are in reach of Bapak, first Vice Rector of UIN Wali Songo Semarang.
Langsung. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, representing Vice Rector 1 and Pak Rector, I will officially open this international conference by reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I officially open this international conference on Islamic history and civilization with the main theme exploring Islamic perspective and practices for peaceful, plural society. Thank you for any attention and sorry for any shortcoming. Wallahu muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for Bapak Dr. Haji Ahmad Arif Junaidi MA for representing the first Vice Rector of UIN Wali Songo Semarang, Bapak Dr. H.M. Muhsin Jamil MAG, to give remark and officially open this international webinar. Thank you, Bapak. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as the event is officially open, finally the opening ceremony is ended. Alhamdulillah, thank you for your attention and appreciation, and also for the presence and contributions to this event. The next events are the speeches and attention and discussion from our honorable keynote speakers, which will be moderated by Bapak Muhammad, Master of Public Policy. Bapak Muhammad has his Master of Public Policy from the University of Sydney, and he got his bachelor degree of Public Administration, Universitas Gadjah Mada. At the moment, he is the lecturer of Public Policy in Faculty of Dakwah and Communication. So, ladies and gentlemen, the next is for Mr. Muhammad, and thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, nabiyina Muhammad ibn Abdillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, amma ba'da. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri, wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Honorable Rector of Wali Songo, Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo, Semarang. Honorable Vice Rectors of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo, Semarang. Honorable Deans and Vice Deans of all faculties in Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo, Semarang. Honorable Director and Vice Director of Postgraduate Programs in Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo, Semarang. Honorable Head of Bureaus, Centers, and Units of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo, Semarang. Respectable the Head of Institute for Research and Community Service and the staffs. Respectable keynote speakers, panelists, presenters, and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, all of the audience present in this theatrical room, building record for floor. First of all, let us express our gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, our God, the most merciful and the most beneficial, for blessing us the opportunity to attend the opening ceremony, to attend this conference, the second international conference of Islamic history and civilization, with the theme exploring Islamic perspectives and practices for peaceful and plural society. Secondly, may salawat and salam from Allah upon the last prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and on his household and companions. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the second conference, the second year of this Islamic history and civilizations, and with our respectable speakers. First, we have Professor Atin Anwar, PhD. I would like to greet Professor Atin Anwar, PhD. Professor Atin, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Professor Atin. Thank you for attending this conference. And our second speaker will be Mr. Hans Abdil Harmakaputra, PhD. I would like to greet Mr. Hans. Are you here with us already?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can
Thank you.
Can I call you Hans or Mr. Hans?
Just Hans.
Okay, just Hans. Thank you, Hans, for attending this conference. And our third speaker would be Nasef Manabilang Adyong, PhD from Philippines. Nasef, are you here with us?
Hello, assalamualaikum to everyone, and thanks for the invitation.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Nasef. Can I call you Nasef, just Nasef?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you, Nasef. All right. Before we begin, I was just informed that Professor Atin will be here until just 11 Jakarta time. Am I right? Okay, so the first speaker will be Professor Atin, and then we move to Q&A with Professor Atin, and then the second session will be from Hans and Nasef, and then we will have the second Q&A session. So I would like to repeat, because Professor Atin has limited time in this conference, so this first speaker will be Professor Atin, and then Q&A, specifically with Professor Atin, and then we will have presentations from our two speakers, Hans and Nasef, and then the Q&A. Okay, before we begin to the first presentation from Professor Atin, I would like to read some of information regarding Professor Atin Anwar. She is professor in Hobart and William Smith College in USA. She got her PhD in philosophy department, philosophy interpretation and culture program in 2002 from Binghamton University, New York, and she also got certificate in feminist theory. She got her Master of Arts in Islamic Studies, McGill University in Montreal, Canada, in 1998 with the thesis Ibn Sina and Mysticism Reconsideration, and she got her bachelor degree in comparative religion in Universitas Islam Negeri Sunan Gunung Jati, Bandung, in Usuluddin Faculty in 1991. So I can conclude that she is originally from Indonesia. Am I right, Professor Etin? Okay. Um,
I'm from Bandung. I'm Sundanese.
oh, all right. I'm from Cirebon, Professor Etin. So we have the same province, Jawa Barat. All right. Professor Etin's teaching interest and research interest in journeys and stories, introduction to Islam, gender and Islam, Islam and environment, creative self, Islamic mysticism, Islam and material culture, playing God, ethical debates in Islam and medicine, gender and identity in the Muslim world. So mostly Islamic studies and gender studies. She already published 2 books, A Genealogy of Islamic Feminism, Pattern and Change in Indonesia, and Gender and Self in Islam. We have we have pages of her publications, but I will not read it here because we will um, have more time to read all her publications, of course. So I would like to welcome Professor Etin to give her presentations. The floor is yours, Professor Etin.
Baik.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are right now. I would like to first of all extend my greeting to Muhammad, the moderator, and to Dr. Hans, to Dr. Nasif. I'm very grateful to be on the same panel with Dr. Han. I haven't seen you in a long time. And also I would like to thank for the opportunity to be with all of you today, especially to to Dr. Muslim Jamil, who has already given the who was planning to be here, right? I'm thankful for this opportunity to Dr. Ahmad Arif Junaidi. This is really a great event to invite many of us to talk about peaceful coexistence. I believe Dr. Hans would have and will, I'm sure, will have more sayings because you are the expert and also you are in the institution where religious coexistence is at the heart of your institution. So we are going to learn a lot from Dr. Hans. I'm going to just start sharing some thoughts about this particular topic. I may not necessarily talk about religious pluralism, but I have issues. I have some concerns in regard to inclusion and diversity, and that is the direction of my talk. I'm going to look at the ethical concepts of Islamic diversity, well, the Islamic ethical concept on diversity and inclusion in Islam. I'm going to start sharing. Okay, so this is going to be our conversation today, but we can develop this conversation into question and answers later on, so that we can share some ideas, add and reduce probably, and we can engage. I think that's more important than what I'm going to say today. I'm going to ask all of us, all of you, and even myself, because I think we have been talking about coexistence, we have been talking about tolerance, we have been talking about moderation, we have been talking about a lot of things. At the same time, I'm not sure where we are, especially for Muslims. We are still struggling to be inclusive. We are still struggling to respect diversity. We are still struggling to accept differences among ourselves. So we have to think very, very carefully wherever you are from, whether you are a legalist from Sharia, whether you are from Tasawwuf, from sociology, from any direction you are studying right now. Think about the place for diversity and inclusion in Islam. We are currently, at least, given the opportunity to use the new regulation about anti-sexual violence. And the resistance, from what I have seen, comes from Muslims. So my question is that why are we fighting for anti-sexual violence? Why are we fighting for diversity? Why are we fighting for inclusion? Why can't we accept some values from anti-sexual violence? So these are my questions, and I want to share them with you because I'm thinking about this. And this is also the way I interpret the questions, the title of this conference. And it is a beautiful word, exploring Islam, right? In regard to coexistence. I'll briefly talk about lessons that we get from the Prophet and the Quran. Of course, we can elaborate, we can add, and many of you are students, scholars of Islamic studies, and probably you are more knowledgeable to a certain degree on certain things than myself. But it doesn't matter where we are from, but I'm just sharing what I think the lessons from the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran in regard to diversity and inclusion. I'm going to also asking all of us about our own thinking, about our own opinion on whether or not the existing ethical framework is adequate. We subscribe to ethical principle from fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. We subscribe to the ethical framework from Sufism, Tasawwuf, from theology, but are they adequate? Now, are they able to answer the real challenges that we experience? We live in diversity, we live in global community, we live in the bubble of the social media. We are able to tolerate things on social media. At the same time, we can be very, very harsh on social media. So that is the question that we have in front of us. Is the ethical framework adequate enough to discuss inclusion and diversity? Now I'm going to move into exploring contextual backgrounds. I may identify some of them, but I would like you to think a lot and help me to add more into the contextual backgrounds. If we are going to talk about inclusion and diversity, what are our conversation about? What are our contextual backgrounds? I've identified some of them. I'm sure there are many more, and you are welcome on the chat to add. 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。
Yes. 。 .
。 . 。 . 。 In my mind, when I think about inclusion and diversity, when I think about peaceful coexistence, here are some ideas. We have religious gap. I'm talking about Muslims. On the one hand, we have Islamic radicalism. On the other hand, we have Islamic liberalism. And then in the middle, we have Islamic moderation. How do we navigate the gap between Islamic radicalism and Islamic liberalism? When we talk about wasatiyah, Islamic moderation, what does it look like? We tend to, and I'm going to do it too today, we tend to look at the Quran and we say, aha, it's in the Quran, right? When we talk about moderation. So what does it look like within the Indonesian context? So that is the challenge to religious coexistence. What does embracing Islamic moderation mean within the context of Indonesia, within the context of our neighborhood, within the context of our friendship, within the context of our everyday communication? So we have to try to bring that into everyday action. Economic gap, the poor and the rich. We have this gap. And how do we navigate this gap? How do we talk about diversity and inclusion within the context of economic gap? Where is the place of social justice when it comes to the gap between the poor and the rich? We have gender gap. Women anywhere in the world live in a male-dominated society. Indonesia is ranked number 101 or 2 or 4, but it is at the early 100. There are about 156 countries that are surveyed by the World Economic Forum, and Indonesia is number 100 something. So we clearly have gender gap, and gender gap identifies 4 gaps: gap in education, gap in education, gap in health care, gap in political participation, gap in the economic participation. So we have this gap. Sexuality gap between heterosexuality and LGBTQ. How are we going to talk about coexistence, plural society, if this is just last week someone was inviting a person I know to become the editor for a journal, and the journal is on social disaster or something like that. And one of the conversation, the highlight of the conversation when I was listening to it, LGBTQ is seen as a social disaster. I was shocked when I, when I heard this kind of conversation. We could be different, we could be heterosexual, but at the same time, we cannot deny the humanity of other people. And how can we be that person? Could we think about the other as ourselves? That's what I call sexuality gap. Privilege gap. We see this all the time. People with more opportunity, certain race is more privileged than others. People with the privilege to get education, to get employment, or privilege due to connection, privilege due to kinship, privilege due to wealth. In Indonesia, privilege could come from your social organization, whether you are NU, Muhammadiyah, PMI, HMI, that give you privilege too. You may get your job because you are an NU member. You may get the job because you are HMI member. health gap, access to medicine, political gap between democracy and authoritarianism. When we think about coexistence, when we think about plural society, we have to be able to bring together all these gaps. We cannot have a just society, a moderate society, if we continue to maintain infrastructure that support the economic gap. We cannot have a plural society when we continue to maintain gender gap, where men benefit more from men benefit more from society in comparison to women. We cannot talk or cannot have a coexistent living if we continue to maintain a healthcare gap. These are things to think about. I don't know the answer, but I'm hoping that all of us are going to be part of the solution. To think about all those gaps, we have to reimagine the public. The public is the marketplace for ideas. You cannot control the public, especially with social media. I don't know how many of you who are eaten alive by hoax, by misinformation. And I don't know how many of you who would perpetuate misinformation as the truth, sharing hoax information with others. The public is the shared space. We can look at the public right now. Which religion is dominating? Which gender is dominating? Which sexuality is dominating? Which class is dominating? We can ask that question. If we still have domination, if we still have a group dominates the public, then we are no longer talking about the public as a shared space. The public is a site for expressing identity. Which identity is more prominent in the public? The public is a site for togetherness. Which communities? These ideas come from a research in my university where some students are looking at which race dominates the public space in campus. And this question has inspired me to think about which religion in Indonesia dominates the public, which group, social organization dominates the public. If we want to have a just religion, just public space, then again, we have to ask ourselves, who dominates the public? If we don't ask that kind of questions, then we are not even aware about our own domination in public. The public serves as a site for unemotional attachment. You are attached to your emotion in public. We could see this more on social media. You are attached to the public. For instance, when you are not given the opportunity to mudik, for instance, you are attached to the public. You are attached to the practice of mudik, and that's your emotional attachment. There are so many examples of emotional attachment as part of the public. The question for us is whether we are able to reimagine the public, where all ideas are welcome, where the space is shared between majority and minority, between Islam and other religions, where your identity is recognized, that is diversity, yet at the same time, you are able to be more inclusive. Your togetherness, your community is recognized, that diversity. At the same time, you are able to recognize the existence of others. So all of these are questions that will be answered in time. maybe not tonight. Given all the challenges, all of them are challenges to all of us within the Indonesian context, I'm going to move into some samples from the Quran. I'm not the expert of the Quran, but I'll try my best to point out some ideas of inclusion of diversity in the Quran. The Quran uses the story of Adam. The Quran uses the story of the creation of humans from min nafs wahida. In any story of creation, we are told that we are all human agents. We are told that we are moral beings. As you all know that makhluk, we are makhluk, right? God created beings. Makhluk is a derivative of khalaqah, but it is also connected to the word akhlaq. So makhluk, what is akhlaq? Moral behavior. Makhluk, moral beings. So we are all agents. What does it mean in reality, in real life? If we are using the framework of human rights, we are human agents who are invaluable. We are agents due to, in Kantian language, we are moral agents because we are the end in ourselves. We are not means for anybody. Although in real life, people use people, right? In real life. But in Kantian philosophy, I'm using Kantian philosophy because in Kantian philosophy, Immanuel Kant, it talks about human agency as the end in themselves. We are not means to anyone. We are makhluk, we are moral beings, and we are the end in ourselves. We are invaluable, meaning that no one can harm us because we are all equal before God. The Quran also talks about androgynous humanity. Humanity is not man, although some people would use the story of Adam for it. But honestly, the story of Adam is one of the story in the Quran, the story of creation. The Quran talks about the creation of human beings from substances. We are created from a tin, from air, from soil, from so many different things. And when in my book I talk about the creation of human beings in the story of Adam, in the concept of nafs wahida, min nafs wahida, and also from material substances. The Quran also talks about ta'aruf, that we know each other. What does it mean? Our life is meaningful due to other people. We find meaning in relation to other human beings. You may like your cat, right? Do you have cat? You may like your cat. Some people in America have dogs. Although we may like our cat, but we don't try to define our humanity only based on our kindness to our cat. Because we find humanity in our relationship to our human being. Let's call it humanity. The Quran also talks about human beings as the beholder of justice. There are so many places where the Quran asks us to hold justice dearly. You cannot misuse of our position as human beings. Do justice no matter what. If the Quran requires us to use justice in a just manner, it would mean that we cannot discriminate against other people. We have to be inclusive of all kind of people. The concept of fastabiqul khairat. This concept also introduces us into diversity. If we are competing, Many of us are professors. When we tell our student, do your best, are we talking only about one student, or we are talking about many students so they can compete to be the best in the class? So Fastabikul Khairat assumes that they are diverse people, they are diverse languages, they are diverse tribes. So we have to compete for goodness, to do good. And a competition requires more than just one person. It requires a different, it requires the other in the process. No compulsion in religion. Of course, people would say Islam is the best because it is in the Quran. The Quran talks that God has perfected Islam. At the same time, the Quran talks about La ikraha fid din. It assumes that there are different religions. It assumes diversity. It assumes respect. It assumes belonging to one religion at the same time having respect for others. Civic-minded moderate community. It also assumes that we have the tendency to not be moderate. If you remember that the context of this particular verse had to do with Muslims praying to Jerusalem. And the Prophet Muhammad received the revelation in middle of prayer, and he changed the direction of the prayer to Mecca, to Qiblat now. The lesson for Muslims at that time, we have to be civic-minded. Because you are part of this community, the community of Muslims, you have to be civic-minded. At the same time, the community of Muslims in Mecca, in Medina at the time, had a lot of elements. The Jewish were were signatories of the Medina Constitution. And I would imagine pagans were there too in Medina. Muslims from Mecca, Muslims from Medina came together, and all of these groups were signatories of the Medina constitutions. For that very reason, Muslims were told to be civic-minded. Muslims were told to accept diversity at that particular time. At the personal level, the Quran also talks about acceptance. The heart that accepts. If we are accepting Islam, it would mean that we also look at the truth from other religions, from Christianity, from Judaism. You may make the argument that Christianity has already or changed the teaching from one God to Trinity, for instance. At the same time, the Quran considers the followers of Judaism and Christianity as the people of the book. By the end of the day, when we are reading the Quran, we have to understand what is the intent in the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad was giving us the example in his lifetime. He even borrowed money to the Jews, because the Jews were signatories of the Medina Constitution. So they were there in Medina. The Quran may say something like, "Walam tardo angkal Yahudu wa Nasara hatta tabi'a millata." There is context to it, because some Jews were actually supportive of the Prophet Muhammad at the time. When we read the Quran, the context of the revelation, Asbabun Nuzul, isn't there anymore. So a lot of time we are taking the word of the Quran literally, while in fact there was context to it. I'm going to look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad. I don't look at hadith, but you could do it. You could look for inclusion and diversity in hadith, but I'm going to just look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad. Are you ready? If we are looking at the life of the Prophet Muhammad was inclusive of Christianity and Judaism. 70% of the content of the Quran, it is about Christianity and Judaism. Yes, the Prophet Muhammad showed the disagreement, the Quran showed disagreement. But by the end of the day, Jews and Christians are the people of the book. The Prophet Muhammad was inclusive of Bedouin culture, especially the concept of God. Islam wasn't born in Khartoum. Islam was born in Saudi Arabia, and the Prophet Muhammad was quote unquote absorbing the culture, the belief system of the Bedouin. The concept of God, Allah as the creator of the samawat of heaven, was a part of this Bedouin understanding. The Prophet Muhammad concept of honor was part of the Bedouin understanding. The concept of amana, that also part of the Bedouin understanding. Yes, someone like Said Qutb talks about Jahiliyah, modern Jahiliyah during the Prophet lifetime. Deep down, if we are looking at the example of the Prophet Muhammad, we could see the connectivity between Bedouin culture and the Prophet Muhammad. He was born within that context. What is new in the prophetic teaching, in my opinion, is the belief in the hereafter, the belief in Qiyamah. Hagan didn't believe in afterlife, but the Prophet Muhammad taught about afterlife. And I think Islam has a very comprehensive teaching on afterlife. The prophetic inclusion, the prophetic teaching and stories. I'm talking about former prophet, from Adam to Jesus. Without Christianity and Judaism, we won't have prophetic teaching and stories. In fact, many of you probably use the stories of prophets and teaching of prophets as part of Islam now. If we talk about homosexuality, for instance, many of you would go back to the story of Sodom, and that story isn't part of the prophet's story, it is the story of the past. Inclusion of groups, race, and various age groups. There were stories about the Prophet Muhammad talking to old ladies. There were stories about the Prophet Muhammad talking or taking care the grandchildren. He gave the example of how to be tender to children. There were conversations about the Prophet Muhammad with women. Women were protesting about not being called in the Quran, and then the Quran revealed the verse about women was revealed in the Quran. Different group, different race. Some people were darker, some people were whiter. All of them were included in the story of the Prophet Muhammad. The inclusion of women as humans. At that particular time, women were not given inheritance, for instance. Some people were angry about it and spoke to the Prophet Muhammad saying even ugly women got inheritance, because remember, inheritance has to do with privilege, with having something, having property or money enough. And when presumably when women have wealth, they have a power dynamic with the husband. Inclusion of able and non-able bodies. There were stories about people who were not able to see, and how the person has to be treated equally. There were inclusion of, and I think this is my favorite one, inclusion of a unified relationship between body and soul. The story of Mi'raj, that was the best example to demonstrate the body-soul relationship. even receiving the revelation, that's body soul relationship. How wahyu or revelation was imprinted in his heart. That's the recognition of body between body and relationship. Inclusion of a unified relationship between body and soul could also be seen in prayer, because when we pray, we have to center ourselves to God, and at the same time, not just our body. I sometimes cook while I'm praying, right? Like Allahu Akbar, and I know I finish cooking when I said Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. But the Prophet Muhammad taught us to be inclusive in regard to our body. Inclusion of land, space, and time. If you look at the Quran speaks not only about the time when the Prophet Muhammad was alive, but about the past civilization, about past examples, past prophet. But the Quran also talks about eschatology, what would happen next. So everything is continuum in Islam. Inclusion of lands. There are so many stories about land in the Quran. Inclusion of time. I speak here about space. Inclusion of heaven, Jannah, and Samawat, and earth, Samawat and earth. So everything is about unity. That's why we have Tawheed. So this is Tawheed. Tawheed is unity. We only understand Tawheed in terms of the unity of God, God attributes, God action. But unity is actually inclusivity. Unity, the Tawheed is about the inclusivity of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Inclusivity in terms of our understanding of God. Muslims' understanding of God relies not only on the Quranic understanding of God, but this concept of Allah has existed before, solidified by the Quran, and will continue on. Tawheed could also mean unity of humans, regardless of skin color, language, religion. Unity is the inclusion of men and women as humans. That is Tawheed. Unity, Tawheed is in terms of unity between able and non-able bodies. With this in mind, Muslims could find the examples of inclusion and diversity from the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And that is our capital, our strength in living within a pluralistic society. I'm going to pick you into the discussion of ethical theories. I was asking earlier, what kind of ethical theories could answer our need? I'm going to briefly talk about sources for ethical theories in Indonesia. It could be from Islam, Quran, Hadith. It could be from Sharia fiqh, because they carry a different role. It could also be from Pancasila and Undang-Undang Dasar 45. That's also the source for ethical discourses. When we talk about, let's say, social justice in Indonesia, we could provide the Islamic foundation, but it is clearly part of Pancasila and Undang-Undang 45. When we talk about social justice, it is also part of human rights discourses. Human rights discourses speak about the need for individuals to have access to livelihood, to have access to economic ability, local wisdoms. You guys live in Wali Songo University. I'm sure there are local wisdom within your own culture. I'm from West Java. I have local wisdom as well from my own culture. So there are different ethical discourses that would help us to navigate our life in a pluralistic society. I put Pancasila and Undang-Undang Dasar 45 because both principles warrant or guarantee our citizenship. our equal status before law. And that is very, very important. Yes, we are Muslim, we could go back to the Quran and the Hadith, but at the same time, at the state level, Pancasila and Undang-Undang 45 are very, very important in giving us the ethical values. Muslim ethics, Islamic ethics, a lot of time, it pertains to claims and duties that we have, whether to ourselves, to God, to other human beings, and nature. There are three types of ethics. We have the ontological ethics. I use the term the ontological ethic. The ontology is part of the Kantian, Immanuel Kantian ethic, the ontology. However, here I'm using the ontological ethics as a way to talk about the type of ethics that emphasizes duty-based moral rules, the duty to perform the permissible and the duty to avoid impermissible. So that's one formulation of ethics. Virtue ethics, it is more or less about akhlaq, about adab, about what is moral. But virtue ethic in a bigger discussion, it has to do with Aristotelian ethic. It talks about the middle ground. Virtue ethic is in the middle. Utilitarian ethic, it comes also in the Western world. It is part of a big theory, but in Islam, utilitarian ethic can be seen in masalah, public good, or maqasid sharia, the goal of Sharia. These are example of ethics. So the ethic could be duty-based moral values. It could be based on akhlaq, adab. It could also be on the basis of public good or maqasid sharia. Now, this is the last part of my conversation. When we think, so going back to ethical values here, as you could see, these are ethics that are defined within the context of Sharia minded, within the context of legalistic or juristic minded. The question is why Sharia minded theory of ethics becomes a hegemonic force. Why Islamic quote-unquote ethical radiology come to gain significance. And this is the most important part. Why ethics of diversity and inclusion are inexistent or do not exist. Now, the reason why I come back to these three questions, because we clearly see from the Quran, from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, we have the ethics of inclusion, the ethics of diversity. But when it comes to the three types of ethics, the ontological ethics or duty-based ethics or virtue ethics, adab akhlaq or utilitarian ethic, public good and maqasid sharia, we hardly see ethics of inclusion and diversity. In fact, we don't talk about ethics of inclusion and diversity when we talk about Sharia, when we talk about akhlaq and adab. And all of this forced me to think, how do we move forward? I don't like beautiful words like living in a pluralistic society. That's beautiful. But how do we do that? We have to have hard conversation to be able to address real problems. In Indonesia, we have, I'm sorry, Hans, I'm going to make the example. Some people are anti-Christian, some Muslims. Some Muslims are anti-women who are feminists, for instance. Some Muslims are anti-LGBTQ. And these are important realities. I'm no longer talking about Islamic radicalism. Yes, we have Islamic radicalism. But we have real problems with real people. So we stop talking about beautiful word, pluralistic society. But we have to really work one by one and address the problem one by one. For that very reason, this event, this conference is very, very important. Because we want to unpack the beautiful word of pluralistic society and navigate a difficult conversation. What I'm presenting to you, it is a very difficult conversation. We have gap here and there. We have anti-sentiments toward other religion, toward other sexuality, toward other human beings, namely women. And I question what kind of ethics can we have in the future. And this is the task of all the speakers and participants and every Muslim in this case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Etin. I think I have some sentences got from you. First, we cannot have peaceful and plural society when we keep maintaining the gaps in many aspects of the society, in economy, social, cultures, religion, and many things. Um, Identity. I can learn also from you that identities and diversity are given to humanity from our God, but how that identities and diversity can be managed to be inclusive society. I think you've also posed some critical questions regarding our phenomena, social phenomena. So it will be good for us to start questioning ourselves whether we are capable, whether we are aware of our shortcomings in inclusivity. I think, therefore, exploring perspectives, ethical frameworks for our religion is also important, and that's where Professor Etin explained illuminating presentation. Thank you for illuminating your illuminating presentation, Professor Etin. I will give opportunity to the audiences to have questions. We will now begin the Q&A session, uh, specifically for Professor Etin. Audiences from in online platform can post the questions in chat rooms. I think we have one question from the chat room from Ibu Titi. Okay, I will read it for you. Prophet Muhammad has taught an inclusive perspective, including viewing women as free beings, but there is still a few of some Muslims who consider women as second beings, even as objects that often get unpleasant treatment, such as efforts to domestications of women and victims of sexual violence. Uh, what Professor Etin thinks about this? So we know that Islamic teachings has ethical frameworks regarding women, but in current social phenomena, many people still consider women as marginated.
Thank you very much, Dr. Titik. I can put the name, number, and face. Thank you for asking the question. Anyway, so in my work, if you guys get my book, Genealogy of Islamic Feminism, Feminism Islam, that's the translation. Butitik, please get one, okay? uh, the idea that so there are three distinctive feature in fiqh in Islamic jurisprudence about women. First, women are secondary being. Second, women are domestic being, and women. The third is that women are sexual being, and all of these are rooted in hadith. So the hadith exists, and at the same time, some fiqh scholars took the hadith and make the ideas of women as sexual being, domestic being, and secondary being prominent. So there is a process of canonization from the hadith into a juristic mindset and into our mind. Now, when and in the hadith there is justification, for instance, why women are sexual beings, and I think this is the difficulty for some men, Muslim husbands, who are very reluctant to accept the bill for anti-sexual violence because women are positioned to say no to sex in the husband-wife relationship. So the women has to consent. They are not just available, but they have to consent. Women as domestic being, there are hadiths where women should stay home, and staying home is better. Or women couldn't go out in public. If they go, I read this hadith because I did it for my book. uh, uh, if women go out, they have to avoid busy roads. So they have to look for empty road, or the outskirt of the road, to be safe. While in fact, in my opinion, I feel safer with more people in comparison going to place that is with less people. Secondary being, of course, the story of the creation of Adam justifies that Eve was created from Adam's rib. Now, although and I think that information is also in hadith. Although hadith is very very important, we all know that Bukhari and Muslim attempted to classify hadith. Some hadiths are hasan, some hadiths are weak, daif. So there are classifications of hadith. I'm not gonna go into how hadith was quote unquote constructed within the context of sultanate at that period. So on hadith and how hadith was used also to justify how Islam in the beginning. But I'm not gonna go there. The point here is that if we are looking at women as sexual being, is that what the Quran says? If we are looking at women as domestic being, is that the example of Khadijah? Is that the example from the Quran? If women are secondary being, is that what the Quran says? The Quran clearly puts men and women as equal being. Makhluk. Makhluk means moral being. Just think about kholako, akhlak, makhluk. The word makhluk connotes moral being. Men and women are moral being. So if we think that we are makhluk of Allah, it would mean that we are actually talking about ourselves as moral beings. So, Butitik, in my research, I try to do justice to the text, and I believe in Islam, not because I'm Muslim, because Islam provides a framework for equality between men and women. Islam teaches. Islam is the first religion to abolish female infanticide. Islam is the first religion to say you are equal before God by stating Shahada. So, so it cannot be less than what the Prophet Muhammad has done for women. If all of us believe that the Prophet Muhammad is our prophet, then you have to pick the example from him. He elevated women. In fact, men and women who are doing good, they are going to heaven according to the Prophet Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you. For what you were saying, our prophet is also feminist. I think so. Okay. This question posed, what is it? So peaceful plural society is not maintained by maintaining the diversity and inclusivity in society, but also in households where women and men supposed to be in equal roles, something like that. And Islam elevates women more because the contextual for that. So I think from what you're saying, the interpretation should be careful, right, regarding the hadith and the Quran, because um, basically, substantially, Quran and hadith and Islam in general tend to view human being as makhluk and as equal, regardless of their gender, women or men, right? Thank you for the answer for this question. I think we have two questions from audiences in this room. They are students of Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo. You may begin your question.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Sebelumnya perkenalkan, nama saya Muhammad Fatur Rahman. Izin bertanya, bagaimana pendapat Anda tentang perkampungan yang mengelompok sesuai ras atau agama? Nah, apakah hal tersebut berpengaruh pada peaceful coexistence?
Bisa diulangi. I think I don't have to translate it for you. Right, Miss Professor Etin.
I was missing the connection. I was even writing just to make sure I got the correct question.
Okay.
Could you repeat again, please?
Okay, you may repeat. Diulangi.
Bagaimana
Mic-nya didekatkan saja.
Bagaimana pendapat Anda tentang perkampungan yang mengelompok sesuai ras atau agama? Nah, apakah hal tersebut itu berpengaruh pada peaceful coexistence? Terima kasih.
Thank you. What's your name again?
My name Muhammad Fatur Rahman.
Muhammad Fatur Rahman. Thank you, Muhammad Fatur Rahman. So as we can see that in Indonesia especially, we have some kind of villages or communities that are specifically for from one kind of identity, religiosity or ethnics. So what do you think about that? Is there a threat for coexistence in plural society?
Yeah, very good question, Muhammad. I think this is not typical in your kampung, my kampung. Even in America, we live in a very racialized, we call it segregated societies, communities, and inequality is tied into the geographical location. Because a lot of time, I'm gonna just draw some parallels into life in America, and probably we can also see the same problem in Indonesia. In America, as you all know, we have racial problems between white majority and colorful or African American minority. And a lot of time, one of the indication of this racial problem is the demographical and geographical locations. Now, the way we navigate differences, we have a lot of interfaith dialogue. We have a lot of common programming that would affiliate the geographical divide in societies. Could it be a threat to peaceful coexistence? It could be if communities in that particular village or place develop anti-sentiment toward each other. At the same time, it could be enriching. What does it mean? It could be enriching if both communities work together for the betterment of that particular place. Probably in America, we have programs like maybe this is also true for Dr. Hans in your community. We have lunch program, for instance, and it is usually open for all individuals. And churches, mosques are very active in lunch programs. And in America, the mosque would have iftar program for all communities, regardless of religion. So we have to nurture. We have to nurture a community relationship by a shared programming. Otherwise it would be difficult. And I know the tension could be very, very high in Indonesia, especially if we are talking about Christian and Muslim communities. Let's say the Christian community want to build a church, for instance. A lot of time that would be a source for contestation. The same is true in America. If a Muslim community wants to build a mosque, it is sometimes also the source of contestation. But there are places in America where people are very, very supportive of Muslims. When someone comes up with the permit for a mosque, other people would be saying, "What could we do to help you making the mosque?" So, in my opinion, I'm not going to generalize. I would say that uh, problems, conflicts could exist. At the same time, we have to manage the conflict so that it doesn't escalate into violence on any side. Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank you. Jadi apa namanya, kejadian atau fenomena ada komunitas yang satu identitas agama atau identitas itu tidak terjadi hanya di Indonesia saja, di Amerika bahkan di Australia ada segregasi komunitas tersendiri yang itu tentunya apa namanya, punya ancaman konflik tersendiri gitu ya. Dan di Amerika kebetulan ada program-program yang apa namanya, casual sebenarnya, hal-hal yang kita bilang bisa remeh-temeh, tapi sebenarnya itu program yang bisa kita ambil bersama seperti lunch program atau misalnya ngobrol bareng dan sebagainya. Dialog itu intinya penting dan aktivitas-aktivitas bersama antar identitas dan kelompok-kelompok masyarakat itu menjadi penting. Saya kira itu, Muhammad Khairuddin. And I think Nasef rose hand. Nasef, do you have question for Professor Edsin? Okay, so we skip Nasef first, but we have two more questions from room chat. So the first question comes from Ibu Eka Harisma. So in pluralistic society, what should we do in facing the global issue like LGBTQ? I think it is difficult for us, still difficult for us. She is a moderate person sometimes, have negative sentiment about LGBTQ. As we know, the story in Quran, the Sodom story. So we should. What should we do about it? Do we let it, or do we have something to do with it? LGBTQ communities, according to Islamic perspectives.
Thank you very much. So Butitik was writing. She said that she has the book. Yay! Thank you. Anyway, this is a very, very difficult question, Eka. The question from Eka, right? Uh, and I'm sure that many of you are still struggling to tolerate, probably. Even for me, I'm gonna tell a story first. So one of my children was having difficulty with the medical bill, and eventually I went to the hospital and I said, "What's wrong? What happened?" And then they said the insurance had not paid us because there is the misinformation. I said, what is it written there? And the billing was saying my son was a female, and he is 20 years old. In America, when the child turns 20, he or she could maintain the privacy, right, Hans? You don't have to go through this. So anyway, I was shocked, right? Because I don't know how to respond, and I cannot, what is it called? I cannot assume even with my own son. So I said, well, here in my insurance, this is male, but why do you have it on the bill female? But I cannot. Well, I'm sorry, ma'am. The nurse said you couldn't answer this because your son has to answer this one. So I called my son. I said, okay, this is the problem. Uh, and then my son said, and then I couldn't assume. I couldn't help but thinking, jangan-jangan. So I was asking my son to tell the nurse about his identity, because so as a parent I was like dabduk, what's going on here? But I cannot assume. So I said, talk to the nurse about your sexual identity. I'm out of it. And then he had to send the what is it called, the he had to send the license, because on license there is an information, male or female or things like that. So so what I'm trying to say is that I'm, I could consider myself very, very tolerant. But when I was facing this kind of situation, I wasn't sure if I was ready to accept whatever it is, what come out from that event. Especially in America, because children, as soon as they reach 18, they have privacy. They don't have to tell me anything, essentially. Um, Now, the way I look at the Quran in particular, this particular story, the story of Sodom, for instance, I believe that Muslims have to reconsider how we interpret the Quran. Are we trying to interpret the Quran as prescriptive? Like everything from the Quran has to do with prescription. The Quran prescribes Muslim to do X. The Quran prescribes Muslim to not do X. Um, so, so, so when I look at the Quran, I try to use two things: description and prescription. If the Quran may describe, but it doesn't mean that the Quran prescribes. For instance, I'm going to give two examples. When we look at the story of Sodom, to me, the Quran describes the story. But that's my understanding of reading the Quran. When I read the Quran, uh, on the first 434, Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'alan nisa, right? Uh, when the Quran talks about Ar-rijal qawwamun 'alan nisa, and I'm sure many of you think that this is a prescription. I think the Quran described about a marital relationship during the Prophet lifetime, where there is this case of a husband and a wife, where eventually because in that particular verse it talks about arijalu komunita. If there is a nusud from women, then the husband could talk about it, separate the bed, and fadribuhunna. Really, the Quran prescribed a wife beating? I don't think that is, in my opinion, in line with the whole concept of man and woman as makhluk. Remember, I interpret makhluk in term of moral beings. Uh, so, so, so I look at the Quran and I ask myself, does the Quran speak about this description? Does the Quran speak about prescription? Um, with that in mind, it is very helpful, therefore, to look at what the Quran is trying to say. But I don't try to recommend to everyone to think about the Quran in terms of description and prescription. But that would help when I see some what is it called contradiction to the concept of moral being makhluk in the Quran. Um, I could come up with many other examples, but Arijalu Komanar Anisa 434, in my opinion, is prominent because many of you subscribe to the Quran, many of you subscribe to the understanding of Arijalu Kawamun ala Nisa. But then if you want this to be a model for your hierarchical relationship, then you have to deal with fadribuhunna in terms of wife beating. Even if I have to force myself to look at Arijalu Kawamuna as prescriptive, then I'm looking at Fadribuhunna instead of wife beating. Doroba could also be translated as a departure or leaving, to leave. Um, uh, so if there are conflicts between husband and wife, uh, advise each other, separate the bed, and then you leave. Leave could be, leaving the house, could be separation, could be anything. So you have to find a mechanism that work for you. But for me, in my work, especially Islamic feminism Islam, I translate doroba in term of living. Yeah.
All right. So description and prescription, we should distinguish that in the interpretation of the Quran and Hadith, right? Okay, thank you, Professor Atin. I think Nasef will have question or something to say. Hello, Nasef.
Yes, hi. Hello. I was trying to unmute myself, but it appears that the hosts have disabled the unmuting. Thank you, Edin, for a very insightful talk and presentation. I was wondering, what are your thoughts about? We all know that yes, we are in an academic conference and we provide an academic view on certain issues, especially in this manner about inclusivity in Islam. But in terms of uh, disseminating the information that we've had, we have certain limitations as an academic. We are limited by if we are tenured or if we're still applying for tenureship. We all know that it might implicate ourselves because of these very erstwhile controversies that we are, trying to say in the public. And we all know that academics they tend to have academic language that is not accessible and understandable by multiple publics. So we need to tend to clearly uh, uh, say our language in a certain that is understandable by the lay people, and not to be conversant as an academic that only academics can understand. But we all know that the radical process or processes, they have a wider information dissemination. They even go to the grassroots, to the community. They even host several seminars or talks in certain local communities, and they even now, invading electronic platform, virtual platforms from social networks. They even have invaded conventional media as their tool to disseminate their views, their radical or extremist views on the Quran or on the Hadith. So how can we, as academic, as we all know that we have kind of a multi-perspectivist understanding on this inclusivity issue, counter the the pervading multiple platforms being used by the radicals or extremists. And we all know that we are also being we are also have we have fears because some of these radicals, they would tend to impose their message uh, not only violently but also, will even provide also lead to violent countermeasures just to just to stop what our multi-perspectivist mind had. So, what are your thoughts about those things? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nasif. I think this is an excellent question. I may not be able to solve it myself. But anyway, I think your question runs parallel with another question from Raharjo about radicalism may be affected by poverty. That's not true. I think there is another element. For instance, if you look at most terrorists who blew the Twin Tower uh, came from middle upper class families. Osama bin Laden wasn't lacking of money. He was very rich. So the economic factor, poverty, maybe yes for some, but it could also happen to rich families, rich people like Osama bin Laden. Um, and I read, in fact, I tried to understand very hard. I just published a paper on Islamic radicalism in Indonesia. I know one of the uh, 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 books. I read books by Imam Samudra. He was very eloquent in defending his faith, how he is motivated to do jihad by his conviction. So in terms of his pious self. So it's a combination of poverty, religious. It could be also wealth, religious and religious ideology as well. Religious extreme ideology. It is not just one factor. It is a multivalent factor. So in connection to disconnect into what you said earlier, how when I was listening to you, I was writing how ISIS was very masterful in disseminating their ideas. In Syria, there is a fundamentalist who turned to become a moderate now, and he was also very masterful in creating a narrative of how to engage in jihad in Iraq and Syria. Um, how do we deal with this kind of communication? How do we countermeasure? A lot of time, I think people like yourself and myself, we don't really use social media a lot. Like I don't use social media a lot, right? But for certain groups, it becomes very what is it called? It becomes very prominent in disseminating their radical ideologies. I'm gonna throw something that all of us may not be aware. As you all know, that the feeding in our social media, the diet in our social media has to do with artificial intelligence. It has to do with data science. Uh, what appear on your YouTube, your advertisement, what appear on your Facebook, it has to do with the result of the artificial intelligence. So there has to be a backdoor. That's the term, backdoor work in order for us to be able to eliminate those kind of feeding into our social media, including into the social media itself. Unfortunately, we are not equipped to stop that, except the top of the uh, uh, the executive of the companies could say, hey, we need to input this word into our artificial intelligence so that this kind of words don't dominate. Because Facebook, Instagram, of course, this one mother organization, right? Both of them are not able to filter conspiracy theories in America. I mean, think about Facebook and Facebook and what is it called, Instagram, and the power that they have in term of selecting which one to reduce or not to reduce. In fact, Facebook couldn't even manage reducing all the Trump supporters' propaganda. So, so let alone for us. So my point here is that it is great to think about reducing the contents that are radical or the contents from radicalized individuals. We cannot do that on the level of the technological advancement. Now, what could we do differently? So now I'm looking at I'm looking toward technology, but now I'm looking inward. What could we do as a community to overcome this problem? Some people have suggested, not just myself, that we moderate people have to post more. The problem is that moderate people probably carry more enemies than the fundamentalists, right? Why? Because like what you said, people are afraid of the fundamentalists because what they are able to do. Moderate people tend to be moderate, tend to be tolerant, so probably they let go, bad comments about themselves. But for radicals, they know how to sell and communicate their agendas. And unfortunately, some of us are buying, not even myself, but some in Indonesia buy ideas from ISIS ideology, for instance. Think about women who are now still overseas. When they come back as ISIS members, when they come back, I don't know if they are back yet to Indonesia. Should they be quarantined and should they be receiving special treatment to integrate to societies? So we don't know. Uh, the point that you mentioned earlier about our academic freedom, I think I quite agree. I teach in the American institution. When I was not getting tenure yet, my advisor from my university, when I was a student, told me a big no for me was to write about Israel. That's like a big no. Don't write about Israel. uh, 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 I remember I was interested to write about. I published about anti-Americanism and Islamophobia. My professor was very worried about that writing. He said, "Etienne, it is a big no. Do not write about Israel. Do not write about anti-American sentiments. You don't get tenure yet." Uh, at the same time, even in the classroom setting, sometimes American students are not ready to engage in inclusivity, to engage in diversity. In fact, as a professor in America, that is a constant struggle. How do we bring American students into the conversation? How do we navigate this conversation without uh, uh, objectifying them, I would say. For instance, when I talk about white privilege, we are reading an article by Gloria Yamoto on racism, defining racism. I'm very careful of not saying white privilege because I don't want anyone who is white to be offended. So it's always a fine line between saving my career and disseminating ideas that would be useful for students. Yeah. This is like not finished battle. We have continued, and I will continue to feel and to be challenged by this kind of discussion. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Nasef, and thank you, Professor Edsin. I think it's almost 11, Professor Edsin. I'm sorry, but we have actually some more questions from the audiences here, but I'm sorry, I have to stop this session.
Muhammad,
Yes?
Muhammad, I'm actually right now in San Antonio.
Really?
I'm doing conference at AR, and it turned out that the clock is back for 1 hour.
Okay.
If it is in New York, it's 11 o'clock, but here in San Antonio, Dr. Hans knew the conference, AR conference, and I met you, right? In one of the AR, I'm right now in San Antonio. I will accept two more questions, and I will let other speakers to speak because I want to hear what Dr. Hans has to say too. I will stay until I'm ready to go to bed.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
But I'm sorry, Professor, I think we have two more speakers. But, so we will hear from our two other speakers first, and then we will have the Q&A first. Is it okay?
All right.
So
Thank you very much, guys. If I leave quietly, please forgive me. But I'm really thankful for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hear from Hans, Nasib, if I'm not sleeping yet. But thank you very much, Butitik and Muhammad, for this opportunity.
thank you very much for your time, Professor Etienne, and for your enlightening presentation and discussion. Okay, we move to our second speaker, ladies and gentlemen. It will be presented by Hans Abdil Harmakaputra. He got his PhD in comparative theology with dissertation "The Community of Friends of God: Comparative Theology and the Construction of an Inclusive Theology of Saints" from Boston College in 2020. In 2013, he got his Master of Arts in Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations from Harvard International University with the thesis "From Religious Polemics into Comparative Theology, Ibn Taymiyyah and Theodori Abu Qurra on the Trinity as a Case Study." And in 2010, he got his bachelor degree in Christian Theology in Jakarta Theological Seminary with the thesis "Melangkahi Eksklusivisme, Melewati Inklusivisme, Melampaui Pluralisme, Upaya Pencarian Jalan-Jalan Lain dalam Diskursus Teologi Agama-Agama Kontemporer." Please welcome to Dr. Hans Abdil. Hans, are you here with us? Okay, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Muhammad, for moderating our panel. It is a pleasure and honor to be presenting alongside of Professor Etin and Professor Nasif. And well, I came from Jawa Barat as well. Actually, I grew up in Bogor, so we share a similar place with the of us. So today, I want to give a presentation mostly related to Islam in America, Islam and Muslim communities in America. And from there, I hope we can learn insights of how to build peaceful coexistence and tolerance. So I will share my screen. Okay, I hope you can hear my voice clearly. Let me know if you cannot hear or if there is any issues. So the title is "Between Disapproval and Assimilation: Observation on Different Muslim Perceptions of Cultures in the United States of America." And here is the outline of my presentation. Introduction, then next data about Islam and Muslims in the US, and then the third, between disapproval and assimilation, 4 cases, analysis, and then conclusion. So I'll start with an introduction. So I have here 2 pictures. One picture of Dalai Lama and Mahatma Gandhi. What are the words associated with these figures? In Indonesia, I think perception of Gandhi is quite positive. Dalai Lama also quite positive, although it's less popular. In America, those figures, these 2 figures, are really prominent. They are famous. Whenever I ask the question, what are the words associated with these figures to my students in America, the answers are usually very positive, such as love, anti-violence, peace building, humanity, and so on. And then, what about the word Muslim? What are the words associated with the word Muslims in the US? Unfortunately, not all words connote positive meaning. I did an experiment by typing the word Muslim on Google to get some images. And you know, the algorithm of internet will give you based on where you are. So when I type it in the United States, that's like how people like connect with that idea. So I got some image, and among many images, some of the negative ones can be categorized as this, or not negative, sorry, but just some descriptive. This is descriptive, not prescriptive. So Muslim is identical with Arab, being Arab, and then oppressive, including what happened to Malala Yousafzai some years ago, and then the word rage. In short, Muslims are perceived as monolithic in the imagination of many people in the United States. Therefore, it is not surprising to hear what a prominent scholar of Islam, Carl Ernst from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, says. It is safe, quote, "It is safe to say that no religion has such a negative image in Western eyes as Islam," end quote. In this presentation, the focus will be shifted to the other side, namely to Muslims and how their perceptions of cultures in the US span from total disapproval to total assimilation, and something in between, which I categorize as participation. Some data about Muslims in the US. Pew Research Center survey in 2017 published important data about them, such as question like, is there a lot of discrimination against Muslim in the US? And the respondents said 75% yes. And then the third one, do American people see Islam as part of mainstream society? And majority say no. So many many Muslims also experiencing discrimination in any form, as you can see from the other data provided by Pew Research Center. So half of US Muslims experience at least one of religious discrimination in the past year, and this research happened in 2017. As you can see, there are different kind of discriminations, like treated with suspicion, singled out by airport security, called offensive names, singled out by other law enforcement, and or physically threatened or attacked. On the other hand, the Pew Research Center also found an increase of positive feeling toward Muslims in 2017 compared to 2014. So it's increasing that Americans feel better about Muslims. However, it still falls short of the American perception toward other people of faiths, such as Jews and Catholics. So, but from this, there is a key finding, namely Americans who know a member of a group tend to rate that group more positively. One more time, Americans who know a member of a group tend to rate that group more positively. So if Muslims have American friends or having American neighbors, that kind of encounter really affect the perception of Muslims from American people. And this key finding is in line with another research by the Public Religion Research Institute, who found in 2015 that Americans who interact with Muslims hold more positive view of Muslims and refugees. Thus, this data suggests that it is imperative for the members of Muslim communities in the US to reach out to non-Muslim. And now here are some facts about Islam in the US. The picture on your left is Omar bin Said, 19th century, from Senegal. He is among the best documented examples of a practicing Muslim slave taken from Senegal to the land called America. And on the right is Ilhan Omar, who with Rashida Tlaib are the first Muslim women elected to serve in Congress in the present time. Okay, so here are some data about Islam in the US. Islam came to the US during the slavery era. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the US. The Pew Research Center states that there are 3.45 million Muslims in the US in 2017. About a quarter, 24% of Muslim adults are US natives with US born parents. Around 13% are African American. And then the number of mosques grew 74% from around 1,209 in 2000 to 2,106 in 2011. And I think 10 years later, now 2021, the number is even larger. Okay, so these are just some data. One of the root problems with the negative perception of Islam is the assumption that many Americans have about Muslims as monolithic. It leads to another perception that Islam is not and cannot be part of the mainstream American society. And only 50% of Americans know someone who is a Muslim. It means that the negative perception of Islam and Muslims are most likely to be a perception than reality. To counter the assumption that Muslims in the US are monolithic, it is vital to present the diversity within Muslim communities in the US. For example, Muslims can be differentiated into Sunni Muslim and Shia Muslim. And moreover, such diversity also exists and reflected in different Muslim perception of cultures in the US. To illustrate those perceptions better, which can be found in between total disapproval and total assimilation, I will utilize a study on a Muslim community in the Midwest area by sociologist Yuting Wang. The communities he studied was an immigrant Muslim community in Midwest area, first and second generation Muslims. The theoretical framework being used there is lived religion, and it focuses on the relationship between religious identity and American culture. Through this study, we can see more clearly the intersection between religion, ethnicity, and race, gender, economic level, and social status through the 4 cases presented. The first case is Asifa. Asifa feels that being a Muslim sets her apart from the American culture. Thus, she prefers to call herself, quote, I am a Muslim in America and not American Muslims, or Muslim Americans, like many major organizations call themselves. Asifa came to the US from Kuwait in 1990s, a Palestinian by ethnicity. During school, she had unique experiences. She fasted alone during Ramadan. She dressed differently because she wore hijab. She couldn't participate in some sports because some sports like swimming or gymnastic show body parts which is not allowable for her. And she did not date. She had more female Muslim friends in high school and was able to partake in her religious community. And afterward, she went to women's college and became involved in religious and political activities. In her own words, she said, quote, I have entered a world of acceptance and freedom that I have never experienced in my life. I have the right to choose what I want to do with my life and have met women who are just as passionate about their future as I am. I have learned about a wide variety of cultures, religions, and diversity. Living in America has given me the freedom to practice my culture, traditions, religion, and shape my life in the way I decide to, as a Muslim in America, end quote. The second case is Sean, born and raised in the US in a Pakistani family. He worked hard in school and practiced Islam in his spare time. He had fewer problems in school than Asifa because he is a male. He did not have to wear modest clothes and he could do any sports he wanted to. The only difficult time was when he had to fast during Ramadan. Nevertheless, he feels that he is not super religious and has been Americanized. He attends mosque occasionally and he skipped 5 daily prayer from time to time. He says that I am too American. However, religion plays a significant role in Sean's identity. He does not drink alcohol. He follows dietary restrictions, so he only eats halal food. He celebrates religious holidays, Idul Fitr, Idul Adha, and he attends Friday prayer. So Wang notes, quotes, Sean's family celebrates New Year's Day, Independence Day, and Thanksgiving like typical Americans, but they celebrate Idul Fitr and Idul Adha instead of Christmas and Easter. In addition, his parents often invite both Muslim and non-Muslim friends to their house, which shows Sean the option of being American and Muslim at the same time, end quote. The third case is Elzina, who does not fit the description of typical Muslim women in her community. She came to the US as a child when her family escaped the war in Bosnia. Once they become old enough to work, Elzina and her siblings took part-time jobs to help their family's financial situation. She supports herself as a college student and tries to save money to help the education of her little sister. She does not wear hijab like many other Muslim women in the community, and she smokes cigarettes. Her boyfriend is a Caucasian and Catholic. They plan to get married after college graduation. She states that I am a Muslim, but they don't think so. They here means Muslim community in the mosque. As a result, she dislikes going to the mosque because of the judgmental attitudes of other Muslims toward her. In the word of Elzina, I know I am a Muslim. I'm very sure of it. If they don't think I am, forget about them. They cannot just bear people who are little different from them. Quote, end quote. The last case is Samir. He is known as one of the Wahhabis or Salafis in the community. As you know, the main principle of these movements are back to the Quran and the Sunnah, and also the belief that the first 3 generations of Muslims are the best community to follow. Samir grew up like other Bosnian boys, but changed radically during college. He wants to emulate Prophet Muhammad as depicted in the tradition, his teaching, his way of life, even outward appearances like dress code, beard, and etc. He also maintains strict gender separation even in the Muslim community. Wang notes that, quote, Samir was not particularly religious until he went to college, where he met a group of Muslim students who were advocating a type of Islam that was free of cultural pollutants. That is, an Islam that is pure and free from the influences of Bosnian culture, Arab culture, South Asian culture, American culture, and so on, end quote. And now is the analysis of the 4 cases. First, when perceiving religion as a lived experience, or so-called lived religions, the meaning of Muslim may differ for each individual because each person has a different experience from the other. For Asifa, adherence to what she considers as Islamic precepts matters, such as learning the Quran, wearing modest clothes, praying 5 times a day, and avoiding things deemed to be unlawful or haram. For Sean, he attempts to balance study, sports, friends, and other things while trying to practice religion as much as he can and enjoy life as much as possible. For Elzina, life is not easy, and she works hard to meet the ends. She maintains her identity as a Muslim while ignoring other Muslims' perception of her. For Samir, embracing Islam means staying away from any cultures. His perception of culture is quite similar to Asifa to some extent in prioritizing their Muslim identity over the general American culture. Second is the importance of freedom that enables people to pursue what they like and cherish. Asifa admits that living in America offers her opportunities to enjoy freedom, like driving and working. Living in America also offers Elsina freedom to pursue upward mobility. In the case of Sean's parents' laid-back attitude may not be possible if they were not living in the United States, and the peer pressure in Pakistan would be too heavy for Sean to live in his own way. Even in the case of Samir, he enjoys the freedom to seek a different way to practice religion from his parents and other Bosnian young adults. And third, the public perceptions of Muslims as perpetual foreigners in the US context lead to the constant struggle between their Muslim identity, American identity, and ethnic identity. As a result, such perception impacts the way in which Muslims see themselves as Muslim and perceive cultures in the US. And I put plural after culture because there is no single culture in the US, contrary to certain opinion. Although the scope of Wang's research was a local community in Midwest, I believe the 4 cases she presented are broadly applicable as a typology of Muslims in the US in general. Not all Muslims are comfortable being placed under the category of American Muslims, for instance. Moreover, from this analysis, I want to highlight the diversity of Muslims and suggest that one should not treat Muslims as monolithic, whether in the US or outside the US, including in Indonesia. I have met Muslims like Asifa, Sean, Elzina, and Samir, both in the United States and in Indonesia. And this makes me remember one experience when I was a master's student studying Islam at Harvard Seminary back in 2012 or 2013. One of my friends, a Muslim male from Indonesia, walked around the seminary listening to Katy Perry's song. And then one of the Muslim students from Egypt stopped my friend and said, "Brother, you should not listen to that song. Music is haram." And now, general Muslim perception of cultures in the US are best understood, in my opinion, as a spectrum between total disapproval and total assimilation. The 4 cases illustrate different positions in between the spectrum as people negotiate their identity in the light of perception of American culture. First, you have Samir, who represent a position that is closer to total disapproval. However, in the case of Asifa, Sean, and Elzina, their position mirrored the general position of Muslim in the US that spans over the diverse Muslim communities. Such a position is best described as participation, as they still choose to participate in society, unlike Samir. But you can see that there is a spectrum and different case occupies different position in the spectrum. Participation in the US society has become the majority opinion among Muslim communities for a good reason. Instead of showing total disapproval, most Muslims find a delicate balance between Muslim identity and the dominant culture. Some of the results are contextualization of religious practices and development of various Muslim organizations: Islamic Circle of North America, Islamic Society of North America, Muslim American Society, American Muslim Alliance, Council on American Islamic Relations, and etc. Each of these organizations has its specific focus and scope. Still, in general, their goals are to contribute to society and combat Islamophobia. And I think Professor Atkin also mentioned several activities that Muslim organizations in America usually do in order to reach and to communicate and to encounter non-Muslim neighbors. And we can discuss more about it if you want in the Q&A. And for conclusion, connected to the conference theme, Exploring Islamic Perspective and Practices for Peaceful Plural Society, the majority of Muslims in the US demonstrate a willingness to participate in American society. Participation lies in between total disapproval and total assimilation to American cultures. A Muslim might participate in different meanings and ways, as exemplified in Asifa, Shaun, and Elzina. Still, there is a good reason for choosing the participatory gesture, namely to fight the pervasive Islamophobia and other negative images related to Islam through exposure to the Islamic tradition and diverse Muslim communities. It is an effective way to contribute to a diverse society while also maintaining Islamic identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans. I think your presentation was interesting and eye-opening based on your research and data. And one key point that I got from you is just participation is quite important for us to assimilate and to understand more other cultures as well as other religions. Um, I'm sure that the audiences here and in Zoom platform have many questions, but hold on for a while. We will move to our third speaker first, and then we have Q&A. We will have the Q&A session after that. So our third speaker is Nasef Manabilang Adiong, founder of International Relations and Islamic Studies Research Cohort, founder of Philippine International Studies Organization, and founder of Decolonial Studies Research Network, Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Bangsamoro Parliament, Director of Policy Research and Legal Services. He is currently a Director of Policy and Legal Services and elected member of at large, ISA Asia Pacific region, and many others work experiences and also journals, books, and researches, fellowships, and consultancies. I can't read 9 pages of Nasef's CV apparently, but one of my colleagues said that Nasef is prominent in Islam and international relations. So I suppose Nasef will give presentation about Islam and international relations. So I will give the time to Nasef. Time is yours.
Thank you, Muhammad, and thank you also for the previous speaker, to Hans, also for presenting the Islam in America situation, or what's the environment going on there. I'll share screen before I start my talk. I'll share screen a video, a very short video that would probably remind us on how diverse Islam is. So just bear with me for a moment while I'm just have to share the sound. Can everyone hear the sound?
Yes.
Okay.
The religion known as Islam originated in the 7th century of the Common Era in Arabia in the city of Mecca, a center of trade at which gathered diverse peoples, including those from the Jewish and Christian faiths. At the center of Mecca was a cuboid structure known as the Kaaba. According to Muslim traditions, the Kaaba was first built by the Prophet Adam and then rebuilt by the Prophet Abraham for the worship of the one God, Allah. However, by the 7th century, the Kaaba had turned into a major pilgrimage site where different Arab tribes venerated idols. Some of the residents of Mecca rejected the worship of idols. Prominent among these was Muhammad, son of Abdullah, who was known in the city as the Trustworthy. In the year 610, at the age of 40, Muhammad was on retreat in a mountain cave during the month of Ramadan, when he is said to have been visited by the angel Gabriel, who commanded him, "Recite," and revealed words which Muhammad felt had been written on his heart. These revelations, Muslims believe, continued over the next 23 years and eventually came to be collected as the Quran. They declare that God is one, overturning the polytheistic foundations of 7th century Arabian religion. They also questioned the economic inequalities of society by calling for social justice, and particularly the care of the poor and orphans, reminding people that they were accountable to God for their actions. The Quran declares itself to be the latest in a long line of revelations from God to humanity, explicitly affirming the truth of the Torah, the Psalms, and the Gospels, and teaching about faith through stories about Moses, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, and other prophets. The Quran states that the message of divine unity is universal, for God has sent messengers to every nation and people. Tradition places the total number of prophets at 124,000. In the Quran, Muhammad and his followers, as well as the previous prophets and their followers, are all called Muslim, a word that literally means a person who has submitted to God. Understood in a general sense, everything in the universe is Muslim, in its submission to the Creator, silently singing his praises. Muhammad began his mission teaching to a small group of followers in Mecca, but soon found himself ostracized by the Meccan aristocracy, who were unwilling to part ways with the traditions of their forefathers. In the year 622, facing severe persecution, Muhammad fled from Mecca to the oasis city of Yathrib, now known as Al-Medina al-Munawwara, the city of light, or simply Medina. This event, called Hijra or emigration, marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, Muhammad was able to organize his followers into a community for the first time. He negotiated both war and peace with the Meccans and the surrounding tribesmen, eventually conquering Mecca in the year 630. By the end of Muhammad's mission, he had provided what the Quran calls a beautiful example of the way to live in accordance with God's will, which Muslims from then until today have endeavored to emulate. When Muhammad passed away in 632, there were disagreements among his companions about succession and the nature of political and spiritual authority. In the course of time, these would lead to the split between what we today call Sunni and Shia Islam. Other forms of diversity within the Islamic community, or Ummah, would develop over the centuries. Early Muslim leaders and dynasties expanded the borders of Islamic civilization through to Spain, Central, South and Southeast Asia, Africa, and even into Eastern Europe. In the process, Islamic concepts were adapted to local contexts, at times accepting ideas and modes of expression from traditions as diverse as Greek philosophy and Confucianism. The ever-developing traditions of faith, practice, and spirituality unfolded as Muslim communities emerged and evolved in diverse settings across the globe. Muslim traders, mystics, scholars, poets, rulers, and architects all contributed to the shaping of distinctive regional cultures, as trans-regional Islamic notions and traditions interacted with local communities to produce distinctive forms of law, statecraft, theology, art, architecture, and science. Like other world religions, Islam too has been invoked to support and legitimize diverse and even contradictory values. For example, interpretations of Islam have been used to both liberate and oppress women, or to promote peace and provide arguments for war. In more recent times, Islam has been utilized by a variety of nation-states to legitimize a range of political ideologies. As a result, the experience of being Muslim today is often deeply influenced by the political context one is living in. Diversity of interpretation has always been an essential aspect of the Muslim experience, as particular groups have turned towards different individuals for guidance, from religious scholars to members of the Prophet's family considered divinely appointed, to spiritual guides who teach through the sanctity of their characters and the wisdom of their insight. It is helpful to think of Islam in terms of both unity and diversity. Muslims believe in one God, Allah, whom they worship and conceive of in different ways. The Prophet Muhammad provides the single most important model of how Muslims should live an exemplary life of faith, but there are diverse understandings of how this model should be followed. The single most important text in Islam, the Quran, is interpreted in diverse ways and for diverse purposes, and there's a single Muslim community that is diversified through cultural contexts, beliefs and practices, and the diverse authorities whom they follow.
Your voice cannot be heard, Nasef.
I'm sorry. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Now you can see that there are some salient points in the video conveying, such as the continuation of the Quranic message forthcoming from the books in the Bible, from the Torahs of the Jews, as a unison and also a continuation of the revealed message. You can also take a look at hundred thousands of messengers from prophets, from Buddhas, as being the messengers of Allah to the world. And you can see that the revealed message is not only for Muslims alone, but it also dedicates the message all throughout the creations of the entire cosmos, not only in this earth, but also throughout galaxies and universe. So you can take a look that it does not dedicate the message alone to Muslims, but also to also other non-Muslims, but to all, but to the entire cosmos. You can also take a look that there are diverse interpretations of the Quranic revealed message. We are not like the Vatican Church, the Roman Catholic Vatican Church, that they have one body and the papacy leading them to have a biblical interpretation that is authored and controlled and approved by the body of bishops. So we have different schools of thought, schools of jurisprudence, and even ideas that we have all over the Muslim civilization for the past 1400 years. And so there is plurality and multi-civilizational and multiculturalism in as Islam expand from Arabia throughout the world. Now, when we think of certain uh, periodicity or an epoch in Islamic civilization, we always refer, yes, we always do refer to the lives of prophet of our dear prophet, may peace be upon him, and the first four Rashidun Caliph, the rightly guided Caliph. But we also need not to also marginalize or less of think about the other civilizations that have produced because of the beauty of Islam in concomitant with science, with progress, with development. Thus, I'm referring to the golden age of Islamic civilization from 9th century to 12th century. So when we think about that, we think of diverse opinions from different scholars. We think about scholars conveying their message, not being feared of being threatened of their lives because they are lumineering radicals that might kill or threaten their lives because they're espousing a different idea or different opinions or different opinions on certain subject matter on Islam or Muslim society. So you can see that even in the writings, for example, a recent book that was published by Professor Ahmed Kuru, that even the reason why there was an Islamic golden age of Islamic civilization because of the rise and existence of independent scholarship, meaning the ulamas were independent from any control or strings from the sultanate system or from the political leadership. That all Muslim scholars at that time were actually funded by their own means. They have their own family business, their own economic wakaf foundation, and other means to support their science discoveries, their scientific experiments, their philosophical understanding of Islamic revelation. So you can see that almost 90% of those who are living during the golden age of Islam are autonomous and independent. And according to the scholarship of Professor Ahmed Guru, is that the start of the diminishing or decline of the golden age was when an alliance between the state and the ulama has started, meaning that many of the projects, many of the scientific progress, many of the philosophical, jurisprudential development that is happening during the time were controlled and manipulated by state funding or whoever is the sultan, whoever is the caliph at the time. So you can also take a look at the exchanges of scholarship during those times, especially in Al-Andalus between Ibn Rushd, Imam Al-Ghazali, You don't have to go back further because certain very prominent Jewish theologian slash philosopher, Ibn Maimun or Moses Maimonides, have also influenced many of the Muslim scholars and Christian scholars. Now, one of the pioneer, prominent Christian scholar slash theologian that he had influenced, also influenced by Aristotle and also Al-Kindi and Ibn Rushd was Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologica writings uh, is very prominent because it has paved the way for just a second, someone's knocking. I'm sorry about the disruption in my talk. Um, my mother was knocking in my room. So just to continue, now we do have these exchanges of scholarship between Christians, Jews, and also Muslims at that time. We do have the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. We also have places of worship, for example, in one institutional building where Jews and Christians, Armenian church at one side aspect of the building, at the other aspect of the building is a masjid, and then we have the how to call that synagogue for Jews. So you can see so many tolerance. The Tanzimat policy of the Ottoman Empire. We can actually see that what the Ottoman Empire has implemented was a very secular one because majority of the total population of the Ottoman Empire are not Muslims. Only 20% of the total population of Ottomans were Muslims. 80% of the total population of the Ottoman Empire were actually non-Muslims. So they have to, integrate and have a multiculturalistic and multi-civilizational policies that would enamor and also provide service to not only for Muslims but also for the non-Muslim citizenry of the Ottoman Empire. So you can take a look that with the start of the State Ulama Alliance in 12th century, actually, according to scholarship, it started even way back in 11th century. That it started the decline of the Islamic civilization because of the manipulation or control of the state towards an independent scholarship of the ulamas. And of course, we have the 1258 ransack of Baghdad, where many thousands of libraries were burned by the Mongols. And of course, and the start of the Western European colonization of the Muslims. That's the reason why in the past we're not even talking about or even having discourse about, oh, this is halal and this is haram, or halal versus halal, or this is Islamic versus un-Islamic, or is Islam compatible with democracy? I happened to take a look at Etienne's gaps, such as on gender, economy, medicine. This is quite unique that she also mentioned a gap on medicine because medicine actually or health science was actually perfected by Muslims. Even vaccination, if you can take a look, the first vaccines the first civilization that discovered that perfected vaccination was Islamic civilization. Remember that many of even Europeans at the time were afraid of what happening in the Muslim world because of the vaccines that had stopped the pandemic during that time. But because of these principalities in Europe, because of their diplomatic relationship with the Ottomans, then they saw that there is a positivity being vaccinated. And yes, of course, the Muslim civilization perfected medicine. You can take a look that even European kingdoms would even travel from Europe down to Muslim civilization to have their children, to have their family being medicated by Muslim surgeons, by Muslim doctors at that time. Uh, uh, Ibn Sina's the Kanun on medicine is still being used by European doctors. So you can take a look at all of these great facets, the continuation of the message, where we got the Abrahamic message between let's say the unison between Abraham and his children, Ishmael and Isaac, as a kind of a genealogical ancestry to Jesus and to Prophet Muhammad. So you can take a look at so many of these, and what will happen if what should be the recourse of a Muslim leadership, of a Muslim state? There is actually one thing that I have told you, the reason why I think we are discussing this inclusivity issue is I think the imposition of the European territorial sovereignty. Sovereignty, or in Islamic parlance, hakimiyya, as accorded in the Quranic message, or the sovereign one, is quite different, a different conception with how the Europeans, after the 1648 Peace of Westphalia from the 1111 Treaty of Concord to 1555 Peace of Augsburg, have concocted. So it is quite different that sovereignty for Europeans is actually based on fixed geographical location, as accord to what have the Muslims have experienced with the travels of Ibn Battuta, the travels of many of the Chelebi from Turkish travelogues. You can take a look how they are very well integrated within the Muslim world when they travel. They don't have to present visa or being even checked if they're terrorists or not. So this territorial sovereignty is quite different to what sovereignty it has been the meaning for the Islamic world. It is quite similar to the Christendom. Saint Thomas Aquinas, when he think about the theological, philosophical understanding of sovereignty, he termed it as a public welfare or common good, which is quite similar to many Muslim scholars when they think about sovereignty that is based on istisla and maslaha, or public welfare or public interest. That's how they think about the word sovereignty, which is different now that it's now being imposed under the dictum of based on the 1935 Montevideo Treaty regarding the duties of state, that it should be based on territorial sovereignty or nation state. And this is, I think, one of the things that have embodied to our political schema. So, what should be the Muslim state's treatment to non-Muslim minorities? So, I'm just going to share this last video, and I'll stop there.
Religious Minorities Under Muslim Rule, based on an article written by Tasneem Al-Kik. Religious minorities are often seen as oppressed and vulnerable victims of brutal Muslim rulers. And aren't they? Take a look at ISIS, persecuting, killing, enslaving, and exiling religious groups based off differences of belief. They take the name of Islam and claim their actions are inspired by its teachings. But this portrayal is far from accurate. The original laws of early Islamic civilizations actually resulted in generally tolerant societies. So what were these laws? Religious minorities under Muslim rule were referred to as dhimmi, or the protected people. Short for Ahlul Dhimma, it is often loosely defined as people of the book, but it literally translates to those protected by God and His Prophet. This meant that protecting non-Muslims was actually seen as a divine responsibility and not to be taken lightly. Under Muslim rule, the state was required to protect religious minorities from both internal and external harm. Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Whoever wrongs a peaceful non-Muslim or infringes his rights, I will personally prosecute him on the day of judgment." Religious minorities also enjoyed legal and religious autonomy, meaning they could practice their religion without interference. Essentially, the power of the Muslim state was dependent on providing two resources to its people: security and justice. But there was a special tax on religious minorities under Muslim rule called the Jizya. Non-Muslims were required to pay this poll tax in return for protection from the Muslim state. Muslims are also required to pay a similar tax called the Zakah. But there were certain legal bindings pertaining to the Jizya. Firstly, the amount of Jizya paid depended on the economic status of the payee. The rich paid more, the poor paid less. Secondly, the Jizya was only taxable on able-bodied men. It exempted them from military service and protected them during war. Thirdly, the Jizya did not have to be paid in gold or silver. The Muslim state recognized non-monetary payments to provide ease to the payee. Fourth, if the state could not provide military protection to the non-Muslims, the law required the state to return the Jizya back to them. And fifth, some people were actually exempt from paying the Jizya. The tax was not applicable to women, children, the elderly, the disabled, the poor, and monks. But where is there legal proof that non-Muslims under Muslim rule should be treated humanely? There are 3 Islamic documents that set the foundation. When Prophet Muhammad first migrated to Medina, he contracted a treaty with the Jewish tribes called the Charter of Medina. This treaty allowed the Jews to continue their lives without interference while obligating them to help defend the city if necessary. Ibn Qayyum, an imam and student of knowledge, wrote Ahkam Ahlul Dhimma, or the laws of the protected people. This massive legal text was a 2,000-page comprehensive encyclopedia on all the regulations pertaining to religious minorities. Cited in the text is the Pact of Umar, our 3rd document. This was a list of agreements between the second Caliph Umar and the people of Syria promoting Christian and Jewish self-government and legal autonomy, and requiring their support against enemies of the state when needed. At a time when Hellenistic societies actively persecuted Christians and autonomous living was never an option, these Islamic laws were unique. There was never widespread systematic persecution of any religious group in the Islamic world. Did instances of persecution still happen under Muslim rulers? Of course, without a doubt, because ultimately, almost all those instances were rooted in the pursuit of power, not in the principles of Islam. In essence, Islamic thought declared that the protection of the people, regardless of any difference, is a divine responsibility.
So that is the last video that I'm going to share. And I think that it is also imperative to tell and to relay this message that it is quite lamentable and also quite saddening that the Islam in Southeast Asia is now being, I think, incarcerated within this certain ideology that I would call post-colonial Middle Eastern Islamic version. We all know that there is a trend of Arabization of Muslims in Southeast Asia, and it's not only happening in your country, but it's also happening in my country. So we need to tend to have a gauge of what is the Islamic message when it speaks of inclusivity, of multiculturalism, of civilizational, of plurality, of diversity, so that we can have a sense of the true essence of Islamic inclusivity. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Nasef, for comprehensive explanation on Islamic history. And I think I get that ulama, independences of ulama, free from political influence and many things, have built peaceful and modern civilization across the history, and it's outstanding, I think. Where Ottoman Empire, most of them are non-Muslims, and then where Islamic perspectives are quite
protective in protecting minority other than Muslims itself. Okay. So here we are in the Q&A sessions. Audiences from Zoom meetings in the rooms may chat in the chat rooms, or you may raise hand. Or is there anybody who want to ask questions from this room? Okay, I think we have one question from the students here. Okay. You can state your name first.
Oke, sebelumnya perkenalkan nama saya Siti Nur Khalifah. Ingin bertanya, tuh Dr. Nasif, bagaimana suasana dan perlakuan publik serta pemerintahan Filipina terhadap minoritas Muslim dan negara apakah di Southeast Asia yang menurut Anda paling open dan ideal terhadap diversitas yang harus diteladani? Oke. Menurut Dr. Nasif, bagaimana suasana dan perlakuan publik serta pemerintahan Filipina terhadap minoritas Muslim dan negara apakah di Southeast Asia yang menurut Anda paling open dan ideal terhadap diversitas yang harus diteladani?
The question is for you, Nasef. Okay. Regarding the Philippines, how is minority Muslims there? I mean, the government treatment and the society's treatment towards Muslim minority in there. And do you think, where do you think in Southeast Asia countries are more safe from Muslim minority? There are two questions for you.
Yes, thank you for the question. The status of Muslims in the Philippines is doing good because for a very long time, for several decades, that the Muslims have fighting against the national government, they were able to concocted a negotiation, a peace process or a peace negotiated treaty with the national government. So we do have the Muslim rebels at the time being called as Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Now that the treaty has evolved to a more well integrated within the Philippine Constitution, the legislation, the Congress of the Philippines have legislated a law called Bangsamoro Organic Law, paving the way for the autonomous parliamentary leadership in the Bangsamoro. In 2019, it was established. The parliament was established in 2019, and now the members of the parliament have legislating laws that that would promote the interests of the Bangsamoro, the interests of the Muslims in the Philippines as a minority in the Philippines. It's a predominantly Catholic, Christian Catholic country. So the Muslims now are doing fine. There are no more conflict, although there are some minute insurgents, but they are now being taken care of by the Bangsamoro police force in partnership with the national government or local government units. What was the second part of the question? How the Muslims in the Philippines see it themselves in compare with Muslims in Southeast Asia?
Yeah.
Is that the second question?
Yeah, the second question is about where do you think the safest countries in Southeast Asia?
The safest
for diversity.
For diversity,
Yeah.
yes. I'm thinking of I would say, in terms of diversity, yes, we have Indonesia as diverse as it is because of its archipelagic geographical structure, that there are many islands similar to the archipelagic Philippines, where it has a multivariate languages and multi facets of its cultures and norms. So I think that the diversity is very unique in Indonesia. So long as the Indonesian Muslim societies are not being hijacked by these radicals that are coming from the Middle East, or those Indonesians who probably, because it's quite similar to Philippines, after gaining their education or Islamic education from Saudi Arabia, from some Arab countries, Jordan, and when they went back to the Philippines, they insinuate, I would say, violence. As you can see in our society in the Philippines, there was this invasion of one city. It's called the Marawi Siege. This is the only Islamic city that is actually written in Philippine laws as recognized as the Islamic city of Marawi. And yet there were many of those extremist radicals who gained their education from Jordan, from Saudi, and then went back here and then invaded the city. Actually, 60 or 70% of the entire city was devastated. You can take a look in Google. You can Google that one. So I think Indonesia has a very unique characterization of Islamic diversity. Uh, the second a second Southeast Asian country that I can think of that have kind of a diverse, safe, I mean, when you call it safe or there's a secured environment of diversity is, I think, Thailand. Thailand, you can take a look that the halal industry in Thailand is so developed that it helps even the Thai economy because of the halal industry in Thailand. Although majority of the Muslims in Thailand are in the southern part, if I'm not mistaken, the Patanis and the Muslims in Thailand, they really push forward the Muslim interest, the inhabitants in Thailand, and make it nationalize their halal industry. So there is the sense of recognition of the Thai state towards Muslims, although there are still some kind of conflicts happening or occurring. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the first question is also applied to Hans. Since a while ago, here in Universitas Islam Negeri Wali Songo Semarang, organized a study in USA, and some of the questions arising regarding Islamophobia and social treatment to women with hijab. So, can you elaborate more, Hans, about Islamophobia in US? Is it decreasing, or maybe you can elaborate more on social treatment on Islam on Muslims in USA?
Sure. I would say in the past 10 years, uh, Islamophobia has been decreasing in general. Of course, during Trump government, there is a little bit of tension because Trump had a travel ban to Muslim countries, uh, so-called Muslim countries, and but in America. It's really diverse country. It really depends on the states. I mostly live in states that is more liberal and more accepting to Muslims. Like in Connecticut here, Muslims are very organized. They are very active in interreligious engagement. We have here faculty who is says prominent figure of local mosque. and also prominent interfaith leader. Um, that is called the Connecticut Council of Interreligious Understanding. So that kind of initiative usually help the society at large to see Muslims in more positive way. So it really depends from one place to another. I do not dismiss the fact that there are still Islamophobia in America, but in different places, uh, support for mosques, support for Muslim community, awareness in universities. To be honest, when I teach in Boston, when I taught courses in Islam, many non-Muslims really interested in Islam, and we went to mosque together. They have they they observe Friday prayer, Jum'ah, and also meet the Muslim community. So that kind of initiative really helps to reduce Islamophobia, as the research suggests. So it really depends on where. And of course, Muslims are, even though I think I said in the slide, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the country, but the number is very small. It's still 1% of uh, total population. And even though it is expected in 2040, Islam will be the second largest like religion after Christianity, it's still 2%. So there is a large disparity of number. You will see in different places in America where Muslim community seem to be non-existent. There are no mosques. Muslims cannot gather, and there are only few Muslims. So it's hard for people to really have a meaningful encounter. But in different other places, Muslims organize better and they have programs for society. So it really vary. But in general, the government itself doesn't really discriminate to people because the government is secular. So any religion cannot be treated. It's the perception of the people that creates Islamophobia. Sometimes it's perpetuated by the politician, but yeah, it's a different setting.
All right, thank you. I think we have one more question to ask from this theoretical room. You can say your name first, and then you can read your question.
Okay, thank you. My name is Una. The question, this is to Mr. Hans. But in bahasa, untuk masalah Islamophobia atau sebenarnya masih terjadi oppression atau tidak yang berlebihan yang terhadap Muslim di Amerika, dan bila memang masih ada, apa evaluasi yang seharusnya dilakukan oleh kedua pihak, yaitu dari pemerintah Amerika dan penduduk Muslim di Amerika. Seperti itu. Terima kasih.
I don't think I should translate this because you understand bahasa Indonesia well. So please.
Yes. So the question is about oppression to Muslims in America. Yeah, as I said, the oppression is never done systematically except shortly after 9/11, when the government really imposed certain certain way to really monitor Muslims movement. But in recent times, there are more leniency, there are more events and understanding, trying to understand Muslim communities better. Back in 2015, I guess I was invited as one of delegation. So it was under President Obama's direction to have like interreligious engagement with Islam. It was stopped by President Trump, and now I'm not sure whether it's still ongoing. But during President Obama's time, there are more engagement, especially with Islam. And then, of course, if I can say something from academic point of view, there are more and more Muslims or position open for Islam in universities in America. Means that Islam attracts has become the new attraction in religious studies in many ways. So there are good signs of uh, Muslims getting accepted into the wider society and not oppressed. And in America, it's different. For instance, Professor Etin mentioned about people. Some people object about uh, the building of mosques. When Muslims want to build mosques, some people objected. Unlike in Indonesia, where people can object church or other religious uh, worship place on basis of religion, in America you cannot do that because that will be seen as discrimination. So people usually object uh, toward the building of mosques as we don't want more crowd. We don't have enough space. We don't have parking space. So it's different. They don't want, maybe internally they don't like having Muslim neighbor, but they cannot say so because that would be uncivilized. So they have to use certain logic to twist the oppression. So it really depends on what we understand as oppression in what way. But recently, at least in Connecticut, Muslims can wear hijab, and people will not stare. It's very common to see hijab. It's very common to see Muslim men with beard, and in many campuses, there are more and more awareness to give space for prayer. They call it multi-religious shared space. Sometimes there are more, in places like my campus, because 40% are Muslims, we do have musola, little musola. So yeah, it really depends, but there are growing religious awareness to accept Islam and Muslim communities as part is there, including in providing halal food. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hans and Nasef, actually, we have some more questions here, but I've been noticed by the committee that the time is very limited. We should move to a break session soon. So I think this is it. Okay, I'm sorry I have to finish this session, this Q&A session. Maybe we can discuss it more in another opportunity. I may conclude that we have been experiencing globalization since long time ago. People move to places easily, making them settled in more plural society. Indeed, different identities in plural society pose potentials in which different goals, ideologies, cultures, faiths, beliefs intersect with one another, making it possible for more conflicts. Yes, we face classical problems in peace building, including intolerance, radical movements, economic and social inequality, human rights, environmental problems, and so on. But we need more contribution to make our society more peaceful in particular. Then it becomes more critical. Um, this conference seeks to explore on that practices and perspectives on peace building, whether from Islamic perspective or other perspectives as well. But it will not stop here. We will have another opportunity. We will, I think we will organize the next ICON-ISHIC in next year. Yes. Okay. Okay. Next year we will have another opportunity to have a conference. I'm sure that it will be related to Islamic history and civilization, but not limited to that as well, but in general topics. So I am Muhammad as the moderator of this conference today. Thank you very much for participation. Thank you very much, Hans, Nasef, and Professor Etin. Before we close our meeting today, we can take a photograph together via Zoom, probably. Audiences in Zoom meetings, you may turn your cam on. The operator, are you ready? Audiences, you may turn your cam on so we can take photographs together. Okay, ready? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, second slide. All right. Don't forget to smile. 1, 2, and 3. All right. Is there any third slide? Okay, third slide. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's enough. Thank you very much for your participation. I'm sorry for many shortcomings coming from me and from community. I hope we can have another discussion in another opportunity. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.